Well, the mountains look unbelievable today. The weather is a little chillier than I guess we like it in California. All of that being said, we've had some rain, so that's a positive. This is not your local weather channel. We've got some poker to play. Another private game, another bunch of action. Let's hop in this damn car and get to playing some poker. What you guys all signed up for, right? Welcome one and welcome all. Try to put this first hand of the session into context. I'm losing words to even describe the moment, but let's hop right into an absolute incredible session. And moreover, one of the most crazy hands I've ever been a part of in my poker career, and that is not an exaggeration, not for a freaking second. In this very first hand, we're into this game for about 3,000. We're playing 5-5-10, the straddle game and the action game that I'm hosting here at the bike. It is a private game, as you guys know. If you guys are interested in ever playing, obviously you guys can hit me in the description if you guys care to do so. Either way, let's hop into this very first hand. Literally the very first hand of the session, we sit down and we're playing a bomb pot. Double board PLO. You already know we love these. In my specific holding, I have ace, 3 of diamonds, jack of hearts, 8 of clubs. And we have a really juicy flop when it comes 7, 8, 6 on the top board with a flush draw, giving me the nut flush draw. And the bottom board is 10, 3, deuce. We flop second pair and a little bit of backdoor equity. With the action on me, I decided to bet out $150. Remember, there is 9 or 10 players, I believe, and we're all $25 into this pot. I get no less than 4 callers. We're going 5 ways off to a turn card. That is something people write movies about at this point. As it comes an unbelievable 9 of diamonds, giving me the absolute nuts on the top board, and the 9 of clubs giving me an open ender to the nuts on the other board. All right, well, this is pretty sick in very many ways, and more so when the opponent here from the early position decides to lead out for $300. With the action now on me, I'm never going to be doing anything here besides putting in the pot size raise. It would be really nice to get some people out of the hand, as you guys already know. Getting somebody to fold equity on one of the boards is really important because I don't have anything on the other board. I decide to make it pot, and after quite a bit of not figuring it out, we agree that whatever I end up making it is going to be more than what everybody else has. So I just make it pot for $2,000. The opponent behind me eventually decides to call it off for $650. The opponent to his left decides to call his stack off for a little over $2,000. And the opponent to my right decides to call it off for another stack of about $2,500 as well, $2,600. So if you guys are counting that, we are 5 freaking ways. 5-way all in. This is an absolute unbelievable situation. I have the nuts on one board. I'm looking to freaking straight out on the other board. This is ridiculous. Over a 10K pot on the very first hand. And the river on the top board allows me to keep the nuts as it's the ace of clubs. And the bottom board is a 7 of spades. Oh my goodness. I have the nuts on both boards. I let the table know immediately that that is in fact the case here. After showing our hand down, a friend of the vlog, Chris, ends up showing his hand down as well. And he actually has Jack 8 as well. So we're going to actually 3/4 him in this pot. Nearly a scoop here. And the biggest thing is that the massive side pot is going my way in total as I scooped that one. We were up against the second nut flush on the top board and a top set on the bottom board. So we were in a really good spot and an opportunity to scoop, and we ended up finding it. An absolute roller coaster to get things going. Oh my goodness, it's going to be hard to top that one. Well, that was an absolute mouthful, that very last hand, and I had to catch my breath. Either way, in this next hand, there's a $20 straddle on, which I find myself in. Chris, a friend of the vlog, makes it $60 to go for middle position. I'm in the straddle, and I look down an ace-jack offsuit. Against a middle position raise, I think I should be 3-betting this all day. It is okay to have a hand this strong in the calling big blind range, but I don't end up doing that, which is all right, I said. Either way, we're going off to a flop that comes ace 8-3 with 2 clubs and a spade. With the action checked over to my opponent, he decides to throw out a c-bet of $60. I end up making the call here, and we're going off to a turn card that comes a 5 of clubs. It does bring in that front door flush draw, but with the action checking through, I think we're pretty confident in knowing that we do have the best hand. The river card comes out a 9 of spades here, and I decide to check the action over to my opponent here, and our opponent ends up checking it back, so we end up showing our hand and is in fact good. The reason I bring this hand up is that I think that I missed out on some value, whether my opponent had a hand that was even willing to call or not. But I think at the end of the day, the true reality of the situation is that going for thin value in a spot like that is important and will really help you winning overall in the game of poker. Going through these hands like rapid fire in this next hand, under the gun makes it $30 to go. Middle position calls, and I find myself here from the blinds, and I look down at ace king offsuit. I decide to raise it up a 3-bet of sorts to $200. Only the under the gun player, Armenian Matt, decides to make the call. The flop comes out 5 deuce with 2 diamonds and a heart here. I think if I'm ever going to be betting these flop, I think I'd be betting pretty small here to protect myself. I make it 175 to go as a down bet, and my opponent ends up making the call here, and the turn card comes a 7 of clubs. The one thing I'm totally going to be frank about, and that I've been seeing as a problem in my game, is that in spots like this, I think I've had the trouble and a little bit of the trigger shy situation where I just haven't been going for double barrels. And the reality is that for me to ever get value when I have aces and kings, I've got to also have some bluffs in this spot. The funny thing is, ace king is a hand that's probably good enough to check here and just get the showdown or allow my opponent to bluff off. But the other thing is, it works really good as equity denial when I do bet. And also, there's a small chance that I can set up a perfect 3-barrel bluff here if need be. And or if a king or ace come on the river, I can 3-bet and then obviously bet for value on the river. Either way, long-winded, but I end up deciding to throw out the double barrel, again for a smaller sizing of 250. I don't think on a texture like this I'd be going too massive with my overpairs. I think I'd be going for a value sizing, so that's what I do. And luckily for us, our opponent folds. It's not that often that I play small pots like this and I feel like it's a big win, but in this specific spot against a pretty solid or at least a pretty capable opponent, I'm pretty happy that I was able to at least bite the bullet, go for gusto, and pull out the double barrel. Well, although it seems like we're getting a ton of premiums, every one of these hands has come in every hour or hour and a half. There is a straddle on here, and I look down at pocket kings. I decided to raise it up to $60 here from under the gun. Late position, the small blind, and the straddle all make the call. We're going off to a flop that's pretty reasonable as it comes queen 7-6. With the action checked over to me, I decided to throw out a c-bet of $125. And only the small blind decides to make the call. We're going off to a turn card that comes a queen of hearts. Not my favorite card in the world, as obviously a ton of our opponent's value is now improving and beats us. So with the action checked over to me, I'm pretty happy to take my showdown, so I check it back. The river card comes a 5 of clubs, which is once again one of the worst cards in the deck, as again, if my opponent was ever bluffing, and which he decides to end up betting $300, it's really hard to bluff here on a river card, which brings in the straights. Again, this river is going to be a spot where my opponent's going to be value betting all of his queens. To be quite frank, there's not a whole lot of value that my opponent can be betting on the river that I happen to beat. Maybe some odd time my opponent can have a middling pair and think he's betting for value, but even then, I think my opponent has a pretty easy check call as opposed to a bet call, or a bet get called, I should say. Either way, I actually think about this for a while, and then it comes over me that if I fold and I am wrong, or even if I'm right, I'm going to get absolutely shredded in the comment section. And not only that, I don't think it just does me any service being an id here. I have such a ridiculously good hand, and the only time I ever get to this river with a better hand would be maybe if I had 8-9 suited myself, or if I had maybe ace queen. But even then, like I said, I'd probably be double barreling specifically a queen. I end up deciding to throw in the call here, as obviously I do at least block king queen, and my opponent does show a hand for value, but not the one I was expecting, as he shows pocket nines. Luckily for us, that is literally the one and probably only hand that my opponent plays as he did that I happen to beat. So we get lucky there, kind of, but happy we made the call either way. At this point, we were just catching a bunch of premiums. We find ourselves in this next hand where the cutoff decides to raise to $40. The action is now on me in the button, and I look down at pocket queens. If pocket Hurons weren't good enough in the last hand, well, let's see if the pocket queens can do us even better. I decided 3-bet to $200, the third blind, and the cutoff make the call. The flop comes Jack 4 deuce rainbow. With the action checking over to me on the button, I think in position, it's a really good idea to play these hands a little more tricky, so I decided to just check it through. With the turn card coming the 9 of clubs, it is a really action card here as it makes the board from really dry to super dynamic. It brings a backdoor flush draw and adds a ton of straight draws, although I do double block a hand like Queen 10. Either way, with the action here on my opponent on the cutoff, he decides to throw out a bet for $200. With the action now on me, although I don't need to be caring about being balanced all that often here, I think being exploitative in a game like this is probably the best way to make money. I decided to throw out a raise for $575. Maybe I'll do this sometimes with a hand like King, Queen of Clubs here. I don't think that's the worst idea ever because, again, I do have a Queen of Clubs myself. Either way, my opponent ends up making the call, and the river card is an absolute doozy as it comes at Jack of Diamonds. Pairing the top card's never great, and I'm here in a tough spot where I now probably have to call off a bluff or a value bet until it doesn't come down to it. My opponent ends up checking it over to me. I think that it would be really super optimistic even for me to go for thin value on this river. As played, my opponent can definitely have a hand that contains a jack, so I end up just checking it back. He ends up pretty quickly saying that he missed. I show my hand, and it is in fact good. Well, it wouldn't be a proper poker vlog if things were just all rosy and cushy. In this very next hand, early position decides to limp out here. I find myself with pocket sevens here in middle position. I decided to throw an isolation to $60. I get 2 callers, and then the limper back raises all into $300. A little worrisome. Sure, there's some alarm bells, but what the heck? I'm never going to be folding a pair for such a small raise. I decided to make the call, hoping to invite some of the players behind me to make this multi-way. That does not happen as everyone folds. I asked my opponent how many times he wants to run it. He ends up saying twice. We agree to that, and we have 2 full boards here. The first one comes out king high, and my opponent lets me know pretty quickly he has ace king. And the second board looks pretty good for us as it comes 6-5-3, all spades. We flop ourselves a straight flush draw. The turn card comes a deuce of spades, and the river comes a 6 of diamonds, so we do have a 7-eye flush, but that doesn't matter because my opponent has the king of spades. So good hand to my opponent here. He's going to take this pot down. Still looking to continue to press forward in a really good session. Looking to find ourselves back in the win column. In this next hand, the cutoff decides to limp it here. I find myself in the button once again with another pretty good hand. Ace queen offsuit here from the button. I decide to isolate the $60 here. The small blind, the big blind, and the limper all make the call. Once again, we're going multi-way to a flop that comes king, king, 5, rainbow. With the action checking over to me here on the button, I am in position, and although betting here sometimes is okay, it's a pretty dry board. Betting small seems like a decent idea. I decided to take my showdown equity here and just check it back, realize some of my equity if I need to, and we do just that when the turn card comes the queen of hearts. With the action starting off with a small blind, he decides to bid out $95. Only I make the call here as we now have second pair top kicker. And the river card here comes the ace of diamonds. So an interesting run out here as some straight draws do exist. But beyond that, I mean, I just have a really good hand here. One of the better hands I'll end up on the river. And with the action on the small blind, he decides to go out for a pretty large sizing of $265. There's no need to go hemming and hawing and pretending to think about this and roll a randomizer. I have a good hand here. If you got it, you got it, bud. I throw in the call instantly and show my hand first. Either way, our hand does in fact end up being good. We're back in the win column with that last hand. As we go off to the latter half of the session, there's still a ton of more fun hands to go over, but I'm going to ask you guys to do me one big thing. For this Christmas season, for this holiday season in general, the one thing I can ask you guys to provide me as a gift would be a really small favor, and that'd be by subscribing, liking, and commenting if you haven't done so on the video already. It can do and provide so much more for me than I think you guys even realize. As you guys I'm sure are aware, the poker YouTube algorithm has been a little funky as of late to a lot of your favorite creators, so allowing me to get back in the algorithm helps me in many ways, but more importantly, it will put a massive smile on my face. So without further ado, let's get into the very next hand, which is another fun one. The double straddle is on and I am in said double straddle. Under the gun makes it 150 to go, which was our opponent from the last hand. The $20 first straddle decides to call the 150, and with king 9 offsuit, I decide to make the call as well. We're going off 3 ways to a flop that is unbelievable. Ace, king 9, we flop ourselves 2 pair here of the bottom 2 pair variety. Will the action end up checking through, which is a little interesting? The turn card comes the 5 of hearts. Now the action on me, I decide to throw out a pretty large bet of $350, going in excess of 70% of the pot here. A big sizing for sure, but by not having a bet on the flop here, I think we got to make up for that and go a little bit larger. Only the initial raiser does make the call, and the river card comes a queen of clubs. So now obviously a hand like queens does improve, but to be quite fair, I just don't see my opponent having a hand like that. I think that's a pretty clear-cut fold on the turn. I think more than anything, I'm looking to get value from a hand that is like queen 9 here, ace x. All of those holdings I think we'll have to consider making a call on this river. But the question now is sizing. And that's a great question, and it's such a good question that I decide to ask my opponent. Let's hear it on the table talk. How much will I bet and you call? No, I mean, whoa, chill out. I'm not too much. Oh my god, dude, how are you bullying?
Yeah, come up. It's a call. It's all in. One card.
No, I bet 150. I have a good hand. I didn't know how good. Well, you said they're all in there. If you're not gonna raise, you can pick one of my cards. Okay, then you can pick a card. For free.
The left one.
This one? Well, as you guys can see there, we end up coming on the agreement of $150. My opponent is thinking about it, and I tell him, I'll show him a card. I end up showing him the king there, and my opponent snap folds, so obviously the king was good enough to be the winner. Either way, not too bad, not too shabby. Let's head over to the last hand of today's session. Well, it wouldn't be a close to broke vlog if we didn't end the session off on a really interesting situation. $40 double straddle is on once again. The small blind limps here, and I'm in the big blind, and I decide to isolate with ace queen offsuit to $200. The straddler, the double straddler, and the limper all make the call. We're going 4 ways off to a flop that comes king jack 5 with 2 spades and a heart. With the action checking through here, as I don't see much merit in deciding to c-bet into 3 or 4 different opponents out of position, we're going to go ahead and see some pretty decent turn cards as it comes the queen of clubs. I decided to bet $150. I don't like this bet at all. I mean, it's just hard to get called by a whole lot worse here. I mean, what am I hoping that somebody has queen 10 or something? Being multi-way, I think the best thing to do is just get my hand to showdown. Either way, let me know in the comment section below. Is it that bad? Is it okay? It's hard to tell, but in real time, and especially in hindsight, I just don't care for it at all. All of my opponents make the call. We're going 4 ways off to a river card that comes with 3 of hearts. At this point, the small blind decides to lead for $350. The one thing I'm really good at is compounding on success or failure. So far, this hand has been an absolute disaster, but let's see if I can save it. I feel like my opponent can definitely have a missed flush draw here. He's definitely capable enough of pulling the trigger, and the question now becomes, can I muster up the courage to make the call? The problem I'm having is that even if I make the call, there's a massive chance that one of my 2 opponents behind me have me beat. So all of that in my mind going on, I believe that it would look really strong if I make the call here, and there's even a good chance that my opponent behind me can throw away a hand like king 10 or king 9. Either way, after quite a bit, I decide to make the hero call, compounding on the really bad errors. The opponent to my left folds, and then Armenian Matt from the double straddle throws in the call. All of that for none, as our opponent from the small blind announces 2 pair. That is really good until our opponent shows 5-4. So he misread his hand actually and doesn't even have 2 pair. And then Matt shows king 10. Damn it. So that little bit of happiness was short-lived, as obviously Matt is never overcalling with worse than a king there. So good hand to Matt, as again, I thought with my great plan that by calling I'd look so strong to get him to fold. I think if anything, that river, considering I do block the nuts with the ace there, it'd be a good idea to raise as a bluff. If anything, I think calling is a horrific idea, but either way, by this point of the session, we've been playing pretty okay and making one ridiculous mistake, although it didn't cost us everything. So we'll just grow past it and try to get better. But the one thing I can tell you guys is that this session has come to a close. I want to wish you all a very merry and happy holiday season. It's a blessing to have you folks in my life. It's a blessing for Close to Bro to continue to grow. And I'm grateful, and I forever will be grateful for everything that you guys have done for myself, for my family, and more importantly, for you folks and the little things we can do to help out the people in our community. Either way, let's start with me in person to see how we feel at the end of today's session. Alrighty, so we're outside, which only means one thing. It's a mid-session update or the session's over. And if you guys can see from... yeah, this is towards the end of the video. We have some wrapping up to do. Today's session was kind of like a blur. I don't have the flu or anything. I'm just kind of super under the weather, and I'm dealing with this really bad sciatica that's been crushing my lower back, and it's going down to my right hamstring. This is not your doctor's channel. This is just me talking about a poker vlog. We were into the game for 5,200 and out for 10,860. So 10,860. So over $10,000 cash out, we'll definitely take it. I feel really happy with that. Outside of the first bomb pot, I don't think I played any really big hands. How often do you play a 5-way all-in bomb pot and scoop it? Well, I guess technically I didn't scoop it. I 3/4 did, but you get what I'm saying. Either way, that's enough for me gibbering jabbering. That'll probably close out the sessions for the... Nah, I still have to play because I still got vlogs to shoot, but we'll see. We might have to start playing some public games because it's the holiday season, and I think that most people are not going to be around to play, but for me, it's time to head the heck home. I'm very tired, and it's time for me to go to sleep. Anyways, stay happy, stay healthy, and more importantly, guys, remember to the tables. I will see you folks on the next episode, whenever that is. Thank you guys so much for watching, and enjoy your holiday season.